I'm Aaron Graber with Ventrac, and today is all about remote control mowers. As you can see behind me, we have the Ventrac 45RC, which is awesome, and several competitive units. These are the two most common units that I know about in the marketplace, and we wanted to take an opportunity to bring everything here today on one site and operate all three and give you my observations about how they function and what you should consider if you're trying to make a purchasing decision for a product like these. The property we're on today is a perfect example of where you would use a machine like these. There are slopes because it's a watershed, so you have all of the terrain to manage that flow of water. And there is overgrown grass because this is a property that only gets mowed 2 to 3 times a year. Today, most of this property is knee-high to waist-high with very thick vegetation. The whole point of keeping this vegetation maintained is so that it doesn't grow up any trees or shrubs and impede the management of the water, because this is very critical to the towns that are downstream from how this water flows. A property like this would dictate that you use a remote control mower for one of two reasons. Either the terrain is too steep to be operated on with regular machinery, or it's required by the entity that is contracting you to do this work or the entity that's doing the work themselves. For these reasons, this property is going to be the perfect canvas to use all three of these machines and talk about the benefits and drawbacks that each one of them have. The purpose of this video is twofold. First, and probably most obvious because we are Ventrac and I represent Ventrac, we're going to say a lot of nice things about the Ventrac 45RC. It's not just because we sell it. We do truly believe in this product. We created it for a reason. We think it has a lot of advantages, but it's also not perfect. No machine is. So we'll talk about the things that might cause you to want something else as well. The second part of this video is about comparison and how these machines actually function. Because anybody who needs to do this work needs to make an informed purchasing decision and buy the best machine for them. I always believe that. There are a few characteristics on all three of these machines that are going to be important to consider. And if you watch all of that technical presentation, I think you'll be able to make a better buying decision if you are a contractor or an entity that buys this type of equipment. The first thing we're going to do is talk through these machines. So if that bores you to death and you're not interested at all and you just want to see everything in action, I'll be making some comments while we operate them as well. Then skip to this timestamp and that'll be more entertaining. And if you're still here, thank you for that, because this technical stuff I don't think is actually all that boring. And there's a lot of good information packed in here. So let's get started with it. I'm going to start with what I consider to be the best machine on test here today, the Ventrac 45RC. Again, this is the machine we sell, but there's a lot of reasons for that come down to the engineering and the way the product is put together. Ours is, as you can see, the only machine that gives you two different types of operation. That, at the very highest level, is the most important thing about these three machines. We mowed an area really quickly here to stage this video with the hill in the backdrop, but the trucks are actually parked across the hill over by the other outlet where the waterway is. It's not a short walk to this ideal spot for us to shoot the video. So I had to walk these machines here, and they are painfully slow to do that. That is actually something that needs to be considered strongly because it's going to show up a lot in real life situations like this. In order for me to get over here to this area, I just sat on our tractor and drove it over here in high range, at speed, and I made much quicker work of it. Imagine a situation which is very similar in a lot of these cases where you have to park at the entrance of a property and there's no way to drive back to the back, and there's a lot of space in between that you don't actually have to mow. There's a lot of transport time or transit time when it comes to RC mowing. And when you do that and you have no choice but to walk behind the machine, it both takes time and a lot of effort for your operators. So that's the first advantage to the Ventrac. The second advantage that I want to point out is you can see the deck on the Ventrac is out front of the machine. So that has a couple different advantages. First of all, we're able to cover the wheel tracks on our machine. This machine does an okay job of it. You can see the cutouts in the deck, so the blades actually overlap the wheel tracks. It still does suffer from wheel overlap a little bit. And that machine over there, it has tracks and all of the architecture totally outboard of the deck. That's obviously bad news for efficiency, and it's going to take you longer to finish a job in that situation with machines like that. The reason I have our tractor set up the way it is today is because this is the most popular way that it's going to be set up out in the field. This is the tractor on dual wheels and our Tough Cut mower deck. The Tough Cut is kind of similar to these other RC mowers, where it's a horizontal blade connected to a spindle. There's actually 3 blades under there. It's going to mow in a very similar style, all 3 of these will. But there's a lot of flexibility in our deck based on cut height and the volume in the deck itself. Beyond that, you can take the mowers off entirely and you can use other attachments, giving it all of the versatility that you need to see this machine actually get utilized. One of the things that we know about remote control machines is that in a lot of cases, they don't see the utilization that they really need to see payback. It is very common to go into a fleet and see a machine like this or like this that is 4 or 5 years old with only 50 hours on it. And it might be, to this point, before we launched our tractor, good enough because you still need to have it in a situation that is needing that extra safety concern, or you just literally can't get another machine to it. But the problem is it's just sitting when you're not using it then. So if you're not using it for enough hours, you'll see it in the corner all the time and wonder, gee, is there something else we could do with this thing to really maximize our investment? The 45RC is the answer to that. You can use this thing all across a wide variety of properties, especially in a municipal or a public entity setting where you have infinite numbers of jobs to do. It's far more beneficial to have a tractor on deck as a secondary piece in the fleet than what essentially amounts to a brick when it's not being used for remote control mode. Okay, let's back up and talk about cut quality. On a property like this, cut quality doesn't matter so much as it would, let's say in a park setting or something like that. But cut processing does matter. So cut quality and processing of material go hand in hand, and the reason cut quality is not as good on these two outer machines is because they don't have the volume in the deck to actually process the material. What that's going to result in is having to go slower with these machines and missing grass, having skippers, having to go back over things twice or 3 times to get them. Regardless of whether you're a private contractor or a state or public entity, this type of work is usually about getting it done in the most efficient way possible. So causing yourself to have to slow down to process grass is not going to be ideal. As a point of mention, for the purpose of this test, we are going to have each mower set at about a 4-inch cut height so that it's consistent across the board. They are different cut widths, so you're going to see a difference there. The Ventrac, like I said before, is a 68-inch cut width, and we have mower decks that go up to 95 inches. The red machine is a 52-inch cut width, and they have machines that go up to 60. The yellow machine is a 48-inch cut width, and on this chassis, that's the only width that you can get. Our entire audience likes these versus videos because they're interesting. We get a good look at our product right next to other products to see how they compare. For the purposes of getting this video actually done and getting all of the relevant information across, we're not going to go as deep as we do on some of them. The Ventrac versus Bobcat video is a good example. If you want to watch something that's very long, very in-depth, go check that one out. This one, we're going to keep it a little bit more high level. And the next thing I'm going to focus on for these machines before we start operating them and making operational observations is the remote control itself for each machine, the architecture for each machine, and then the cost comparison as well. All right, let's talk about the yellow one. This is actually kind of an intelligent design. I will give it some credit for that. This is very unique. The way that this thing operates is that each fork of the corners is a steerable wheel, and it cuts in any direction and has the ability to pivot and go to the end of a pass and just turn by just turning the wheels. So you don't actually have to turn around. Now, in theory, that's a great thing. And I think somebody probably could get efficient with this. When you run it, what you'll realize is that you have to almost let go of the idea that you're going to be pointed a certain direction with the machine and just let it be a moving amoeba across the ground. Just don't worry about what direction it's pointed. Watch the arrows because that's where the wheels are going to drive. And as soon as you cross that mental barrier, you can start to get efficient with this thing. What happens to me when I run it, and it happened for at least 5 to 10 hours on the front side of it, and I'm getting better, but I'm still not there, is that if you try to make a straight pass and then a straight pass back and then another straight pass forward, it is nearly impossible to do right away. So you have a lot of skipped grass and then you have to go back and get it again. Now, maybe that's just me being a bad operator. I'm sure the people who run these things every day and manufacture these things are probably laughing at me, but I know it's a real thing. I know it takes time to get used to machines when you buy them and you never used them before, so that's something to consider with this. This machine is rated for 55 degrees. Today on this property, we don't have anything that's over 30 degrees. It's pretty normal on a property like this to be that way. So there's not going to be anything that's going to test that rating. Before you get to that point though, you'll notice the pretty underpowered air-cooled engine, because as soon as you try to climb a hill that's even 22 to 25 degrees like this, you have to back way off on this machine to get it to actually process the grass. This deck has a similar problem to the one on the other end, where the volume of the deck is very shallow. There's not a lot of room in there for material to be processed. The nice thing about the deck is you can raise and lower it as you go. So if you get into an area where the machine is choking on material, you can raise the deck up and let it filter out and through. The problem is, if you really want to make progress there, you have to leave it up and not cut as low as you want to actually get the property done. This is the remote for this machine, and it's good enough. I mean, it's hard to tell whether this thing is something that's going to last a long time or it's not. I don't know. I can't put hundreds of hours on it on tests like this, but it's what I would call adequate. These two joysticks operate forward and reverse movement of the machine, so it's all relative to the red arrow. When you drive forward, you're going in the direction of the red arrow. You drive back, it's the opposite. And then as you move this joystick left and right, it spins the wheels in 360 degrees, up to 360 degrees anyway, and it allows you to kind of crawl around with the machine. The remote is a very important piece of these machines. I'm going to talk more about it when we get to the Ventrac because I'm the most proud of that remote. But just keep in mind that with all of these machines, if you elect to go with a machine that doesn't have operator on mode, then the remote control isn't just important, it's vital. If something goes down with this piece of equipment, then this is a brick. It will not do anything, it cannot go anywhere. There is nothing you can do to get this off the property, to keep working. Imagine you forgot it at the shop and you drove an hour out to a job site. Oh shoot, you are absolutely dead in the water with these machines, but the Ventrac, you at least have an option to keep working while somebody brings you the remote. Let's talk about wheels on this machine for a little bit. This machine elects for wheels instead of tracks. That's going to be a hotly contested debate here today. But the wheels on this machine are very small. I'll get down here with my hands. You can see, I don't know what the tire size actually is, but they're tiny wheels. And as you can tell, with work like this, the terrain you're going to be on is imperfect at best. And when you find a rut or a gopher hole or something like that with a wheel this small, it is very possible that that wheel drops in and the machine gets stuck, or if nothing else, the deck drags along the ground. It's just not a good situation to have very small wheels in job sites like this. The price on this machine is about $40,000, which, believe it or not, is affordable compared to the other two. But the productivity that you get is so limited because of the 48-inch deck that you're probably going to spend more money if you're paying an operator to actually run this machine. So that's something to consider too. In my mind, where this makes the most sense would be a site that has good finished grass, because this deck can go very low and has a very small amount of volume to it, and a site that is very small, requires only an hour or less of operation time, even though the deck is very small, the cut size is very small. And in that scenario, I would only run this as a contractor, because if you were the owner of that property, it would make it very difficult to justify the cost of this machine for the limited amount of time you're going to use it. Now let's go to the red machine. We'll hit that one next, and then we'll talk about the Ventrac last. So this is the remote control, and again, it's probably adequate. It's tough to say. I don't have thousands of hours on this to know if the remote's going to hold up. It's a little bit light, doesn't quite have as much of a feature base as the Ventrac does, but as long as it gets the job done, it's probably okay. Again, I want to reiterate, if you have problems with this, I don't know what the battery life is like or if there's any durability concerns, but if you do have problems with this machine is dead in the water if you don't have the remote control running. This is also their video screen for using the camera on the machine. The yellow one doesn't have a camera. This and the Ventrac do. This is just a standard off-the-shelf tablet. I'm not quite sure how this would mount on the machine. It's a different thing than the remote itself, so the remote's not coupled to it. This is a durability concern for me. I don't think this is going to hold up long-term in the field, but we'll give it a shot today and see what it works like. Let's drop the remote for a second, talk about the machine itself. What you can tell with this machine is that it is obviously a derivative of a different style machine. The slope rating is the first place where the fact that this machine is a zero turn raises concern. This is rated at 50 degrees. 50 degrees is insane. That is an insane hill to be on. 50 degrees is the type of hill that you literally could not walk up. In the real world, I would implore anybody looking at machines like this to actually look at the properties and measure the hills that they're thinking about doing to get an idea for what's truly necessary. Before I talk about anything else, let's talk about the most obvious design difference with this red machine than the others. This machine is on tracks. No matter what you do as a purchasing decision, make sure you demo these machines so that you can experience what I'm going to tell you is likely to happen with these different drive styles. Tracks are good for straight line traction, especially up or downhill. So if you had that hill that was 50 degrees and you had to drive straight up it, I'd probably recommend tracks as the solution to do that. If you don't regularly mow these areas, you'll have brush and trees take over, and that will end up leaving rain ruts and ultimately erosion. If you do mow these areas, but you do it with machines that tear the ground up, that will also ultimately lead to rain ruts and erosion, which will either get you canceled from the contract, or you'll have to remake parts of the hill and do a lot of excavation work to fix it later. Sticking on tracks for a little bit, the track is totally outside of the mower deck. You've got at least 10 to 12 inches that is completely outside the edge of the mower deck. And because it's a track, it's gonna mat that grass down worse than any other drive type even. And you're gonna end up having to overlap way more with this machine. So while it's a 52-inch cut width, you're actually gonna have to factor in overlap to the tune of 18 inches or so to make sure that you're actually picking that grass back up. I'm gonna close it out with this machine and talk about price. This particular model right now retails for somewhere around $63,000. Depending on the deck size, you can head up to the high 60s for this machine. And that's about what you should expect to get this machine in at a retail price point and run it on your property. Now, we're gonna talk about the Ventrac, and some of the things that are relevant here will be repetition from the previous segment, but it's worth just talking about the architecture overall, and we'll do the same thing, slope rating and price. Let's start there. The slope rating on this machine with dual wheels is 30 degrees. What we know about our tractor rated at 30 degrees and the properties that we mow, it is almost impossible to imagine finding a 55-degree hill, first of all. We have decades of doing this type of work in operator on mode, and the chassis and the platform that we scaled to the RC unit is so largely based on those regular machines that have been in the field working for decades that we have an immense amount of design built into this to handle exactly this type of terrain. When you get on the machine, and I would encourage that, demo this tractor, demo this mower. When you get on the Ventrac machine, it will be immediately obvious to the operator what you're paying for and what you're receiving when you buy the Ventrac 45RC. Before I talk about the remote, I'll close it out on the tractor side with just a few observations. This machine is a 3-cylinder liquid-cooled gas machine with a Kubota engine. These are air-cooled engines. This machine is a tractor that can be driven by the operator and used for all different types of jobs. Even though today we're going to do the same thing with them, it's really in a different machine class entirely. So when you're making the comparison, make sure you account for all of the additional value that we're not going to see today, but could be utilized with this machine. All right, let's talk about the remote, because this is very important. When we built the 45RC, part of the design process was selecting a remote control, figuring out what features needed to go on it, figuring out what capability it needed to have, what fail-safes, what features on the dashboard, everything that went into this. And the short summary I would give is we threw everything in the kitchen sink at it. Essentially, the conclusion was buy the best possible remote in the market, spend the money, do whatever you can. That's the one thing you don't want to skimp on. If you're going to spend hours holding this thing and using it, make it so that there are zero compromises. And that's what we did. You cannot find a better remote control than this, with more features and is more dialed to the machine, and that's the point. Even though we did this, we still come in at a price point that's so close to these machines, it's almost unbelievable. And when you pick this thing up and you use it compared to the other remote controls, you'll realize really quickly that this is on a different level as well as the tractor. The last thing I want to say about our remote control has nothing to do with the remote control itself, just how we implement it. And this is a highlight of how we do everything. You'll see, because we have the ability to run the tractor from the seat, we have a mounting point for everything. We have a box on the back where the remote control can sit, but we also have an additional harness here. This is an optional harness, so we do ship the remote control with a harness that's similar to these machines, where you either hang it from your neck or strap it to your waist. That's a cheap way to get it done, and we offer that option for people if they want to do that, but it's also the least comfortable way to get it done. And we tried to think of everything with this product, so we have this optional holder that is very easy on and off. It's super lightweight and it fits any body type, and it allows you to go from operator mode to remote control mode in probably a minute. So it's just very comfortable, very easy to use. Switching back and forth from our tractor remote control mode to operator on mode is as long as it takes you to do that and flip a switch on the dash. So it's an easy thing to do. You can do it in real time. And a property like this is a good example of why you might want to do that. Remote control operation, this is the last thing I'll say before we get to operating these things. Remote control operation is notoriously inefficient. It just is. Even the most efficient platforms are slower than being on the machine. So on a property like this, let's assume that they did not require us to be in remote control, because that's not the case here. And we had the option to choose where we did and didn't operate. I would do this hill in remote control, and then all of this flat area at the base, which is actually the bigger portion of the property, I would get in the seat and I would mow it faster and more efficiently with myself on the seat of the tractor. I'd wrap up on this property at least 100% faster than with either one of these two machines because of the combination of deck width, machine power, and the ability to switch back and forth between remote control and operator on. All right, I'm done yapping. We're gonna start mowing here. I'm gonna start with the Ventrac, and we're gonna mow the area directly behind where we're shooting. And then we'll mow a similar sized area down the hill with each one of these RC machines and show what the results look like. This is kind of a unique situation, but it highlights the importance of having the camera. I'm staged over on the right side of the plot that we want to mow, and from where I'm at, I'm in an appropriate location, but from where I'm at, you can't truly see the cut line that I want to follow, so I flip the camera on as a reference and I can now see straight up the hill where I want to go. The first thing to notice about running the Ventrac in RC mode is that when you turn, it has a really convenient feature of bringing the machine back to center. When you operate in RC mode, it's difficult to know exactly how the machine is tracking when you go to make a turn, and staying online is really important for staying efficient. The Ventrac has the ability to bring itself back to center so that it's pointing straight relative to where it's driving. It makes the controllability directionally way better than the other machines. Okay, so first problem I've had with the red machine. We had it set at 4 inches. I wanted to try and replicate 4 inches across all machines. just absolutely wasn't going to work. It was choking on the grass to the point where the engine was just like trying to stall out, not able to run. So I brought it back, changed it to 5 inches, still enough of a problem that I couldn't make forward progress. So we're now at 6 inches. I think it's actually probably closer to 4 inches in that setting. I don't know if it's because the tracks built onto that machine change the, let me turn the volume down here. I don't know if it's the tracks that are adapted onto that machine lower the whole thing, but right now what I've seen is 4 inches isn't 4 inches. So I think now that we're at 6 inches with this machine, it's actually a little bit more of a close comparison to our 4-inch cut height. So I'm gonna run with it that way. We clearly can't cut any lower than that. The deck just can't process the material. The machine just wants to shut off. So we'll leave it at 6 inches and then we'll go from there. I am having to go pretty slow to do it, but we can't really go much higher than that. I think we might be able to go half an inch higher. So if it doesn't work there, it is what it is. We'll just have to go slow. Okay, one of the things I'm really missing about the Ventrac now is that I've got a single joystick operating this machine. It kind of works. The problem is there's no control for the potential of the joystick. So on our remote, you can dial down how much the joystick actually matters. And that's really useful in fine control situations. So you can dial it all the way down and go full stick and barely be moving with the machine. What that does is it allows you to have much more control with your fingers, and this does not have that. So I'm struggling right now to get efficient with it. I'm weaving a lot. You could expect the average operator after a few dozen hours to be better than what I'm doing, but it is very difficult to get used to the control with the single joystick. Okay, we just finished with the first 3 sections of mowed areas on each one of these machines. The yellow machine and the Ventrac were actually more similar than we would have expected. The yellow machine does a very good job of processing grass. I would call it a no discharge deck because there's really nowhere for the grass to escape. And what that turns into is very good cut quality in the center of the track. Towards the outer edges, it's not so good. So you do need to overlap with this one much more. And because it's a narrow deck already, you end up going over the same area in a much slower pace than with a wider deck like these 2 red machines. That said, I do put this machine in second place when it comes to the job it did cutting grass, which is, after all, why we're here. If I had a very steep hill to mow and I wasn't gonna buy a Ventrac because I was just looking for affordability, the yellow machine would be my choice. The reasons for that are because this machine showed its weaknesses from moment 1 during operation. It doesn't cut very well. Most of the area that I had to cut twice just to get everything knocked down. The deck itself is also carryover from a zero turn. So you can see they have literally cut the front edge of the deck out. There's marks where you can tell they've cut the metal away and added the chains. But what that means is it's a front discharge deck instead of a rear discharge deck like this. So all of the grass that you're processing has to come back out the front into the uncut grass, and you just have to keep running it over. For that reason, it actually cuts better with the machine in reverse. About halfway through, I switched to going forward in reverse and just not switching because that was the most time efficient. And then towards the end of it, I decided to reverse it and always be in reverse. It's really the only way you're gonna get decent cut quality out of this. Otherwise, you're gonna have to double cut everything. So take that 52 and knock it down to 26, not even considering overlap, because that's your efficiency when you have to double cut with this machine. They both have small air-cooled engines, but the deck on the yellow machine is small enough that it doesn't seem to overwhelm the machine, and it still has the ability to climb and carry a consistent travel speed. The Ventrac is in a little bit different league in that department. It's 32 horsepower, it's a liquid-cooled engine with very high torque. None of this terrain and none of this growth gave it any pause at all. The controls on the red machine are very touchy. The problem I had going sideways is that no matter whether it's left or right side, so whichever direction the machine is pointed, you have more steering ability with the same lever movement to the uphill side than to the downhill side. So what that means is your brain has to work in 3 dimensions. It's not just forward and reverse, left and right. You actually have to consider forward, reverse, left, right, and if I want to go left and I'm pointed away from me, I have to move the joystick less than if I want to go left and I'm pointed towards me. That's maybe possible for some people. I can't wrap my head around it. So what you'll see me doing with this is a lot of this, trying to zigzag back and forth to keep a straight line. Maybe you could get better at that with time, but with the same amount of time, I'm able to run the yellow machine as well as I think you can. The Ventrac is clearly the best machine when it comes to controllability, especially because with the remote control, you can dial down the impact of our adjustments so that I can go full stick and barely be making any movements with the tractor. That's something that as a training mode and as you get comfortable with the machine pays dividends in efficiency. Over here on the Ventrac side, of course, I got to use the camera. That's another point on this one. I wasn't able to turn it on. I think I was getting a heat warning from the tablet. Every time I tried to turn it on, it would flash, then shut right back off. It could be a me thing. I'll concede to that. I just may not know how to get this thing sorted out, but it is just a standard tablet and it's roasting out here, so I think that might be the problem. Our camera was working just fine. I did get to use the camera only on this machine because the yellow one doesn't have one, and that did come in very useful for me to be more efficient on this area. I also noticed on the red machine, I'm getting a lot of built up material down here in the drive shaft area, and that's not something that's gonna be okay long-term. You're gonna have to stop and clean that out pretty regularly. I don't see that kind of buildup on the yellow machine, certainly not on the Ventrac either. Something to keep an eye out for here. There's a lot of open spaces that can get jammed and packed with material, and even in the 5 minutes that we were running it over here, they did. You'll wanna keep an eye on that if you're running this machine. It's not very often that you get to run 3 different types of machines like this back to back to back and experience the operation via the remote control all in the same half an hour time span. And in doing that, you start to see the really subtle differences that don't show up on the spec sheet. I would just describe the Ventrac as a very refined product, and then less so as you experience the others. The yellow machine has some uniquenesses about the design that I actually appreciate, because there was definitely some thought into a ground up, purpose-driven intent from an engineering perspective here. Even though I'm trying to keep this purely objective, when I start talking, I just start saying the things that come to mind. And in all honesty, what I'm experiencing. I'm gonna talk about intangible quality here for a minute. As everybody who's ever run a machine knows, there's a feeling you get when you pick something up and use it. We know our remote control itself, the actual box, the remote control you're holding, is a more substantial unit. But beyond that, when you get on the tractor, when you use the remote control, when you fine tune the controls and get it to be, moving in a direction that you think is predictable, the Ventrac feels far more refined than either of these two machines, and the yellow machine is way closer to the Ventrac than the red machine. The more I use all three of these, the more I can appreciate that this platform is built on an existing platform that was meant to do this kind of work. It feels natural, it feels intuitive. Everything about it is gonna click if you're used to running a tractor already. So one of the things that's really nice about our remote control is the fact that you can limit the speed. So the easiest way to control your forward motion, because the challenge you have in situations like this is when grass builds up and overloads the deck, you either start cutting worse or you slip belts or things like that. So you don't want that to happen. But it's almost fatiguing to have to keep managing that by listening and then like moving the joystick back and forth. But what you can do is find out, the vegetation is pretty consistent down here in this whole area. So you can find out what your max travel speed is and then match that to the adjustment on the speed limiter so that you can go full stick and be at a consistent speed. So I'm at probably, I don't know, looks like maybe 60% of forward travel speed potential, but then I can go full joystick, and that limits something that I have to think about. So I don't have to think at all about whether the tractor's overwhelming itself or the deck's getting overlogged. I can just keep going at full speed based on what it's limited to and only make trim adjustments with the joystick for steering. And then I'm just as efficient that way because the tractor has the ability to bring itself back to center. So one of the problems when you remote control a machine is if I start veering to the right and I make an adjustment to the left, on most machines that adjustment to the left will just stay there. So I have to adjust to the left and then back to the right, back to the left, back to the right until I can dial it in and it's straight. With ours, you can bump it a little bit and it keeps coming back to center so that you just nudge it over essentially. And it limits the weaving that you have to do to find center again. And it's what allows me to run pretty consistent straight lines. This whole area, this is probably, I don't know, half an acre or so that I've mowed remote control in this spot. And this whole area, I've got basically no overlap issues, and I've been mowing at almost 100% efficiency as far as the deck is concerned. Almost to the extent where I can even see the edge of the deck from this vantage point better than I could if I was sitting on the machine. And the efficiency I'm doing here, I would say is very close to me operating it. At this point, in this setup, the only place that I'm losing time is in the turns. With both of those other machines, I would be struggling to keep consistency enough to not have to overlap myself to a pretty great extent, and I just wouldn't be making this kind of progress. Once I have all of my settings figured out, you can see I'm online now. I have to watch it, I have to keep my eyes on it, but as long as I do that and I make slight adjustments with the left and right, I can make pretty quick work of it. Now I'm going to bring the tractor up to the top of the hill, and I'm going to stand off to the side. I'm not sure exactly what this is. It's collecting some sort of weather data, I'm sure, because this is a watershed. But I'm going to trim around this and show how good this thing does. We've got a little bit of an overhang here, so we got to get the deck underneath, which isn't possible with the other machines. Ours can do that. We also have just a standard, cement foundation of sorts that I want to be able to navigate around. And what I want to show is how fine the control is with this remote. I can move the tractor fractions of inches and have that level of control. So I'll drive it up here, dial it in, and just go around this thing. And it'll be a multi-point turn to go around it in a clean way, but it'll showcase how much control you have of this. So I did dial down the speed control to the point where the tractor's moving very little. Reason being, around something like that, I don't know anything about it. It just looks expensive, so I don't want to touch it. Around something like that, I want to make as few swift movements as possible. And I just can't even imagine having this kind of control with another style of machine. I don't know how much of that you caught, but I basically have string trimmer level accuracy with the edge of that deck. It's really incredible with this remote. Also, I've been working with the Ventrac exclusively for the last half hour or so. Zach and Joel are on the other two machines. Collectively, they haven't done as much area as I have with the one. And as we saw in the straight line exercise, I'm not a better operator than them necessarily. It's down to the machine. We're gonna call it a wrap for the day. What I'd hope you would get out of this video is not a this versus that. I don't want this to turn into my product's better than their product, but truly to just understand the differences and value where the value proposition is for the Ventrac. At the highest level, I hope I've conveyed that our tractor is unique because of the fact that it can be remote controlled or driven by an operator, and it has all of the versatility that a normal tractor would. in a situation like this, it does this job so well at a price point that's so close to the alternatives. In my opinion, there's no reason to go anywhere else to find equipment to do this type of work. If you're on an absolute shoestring budget, there might be some other small things you can use, but you're gonna be limited when you're on anything other than a small property. If you're spending anywhere close to Ventrac money, you're gonna save only 5 or 8% going with one of these tracked alternatives. It's just not enough given the product efficiencies that those have. The Ventrac 45RC is something that we're very proud of. It works so well in this setting that we hope you try one. If you're interested in a product like this, please reach out to a local Ventrac dealer and get one on a demo. If you have any more questions about our product, then visit us on the website at ventrac.com. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more videos. Thanks for watching.